Star Wars is obsessed with destiny, and with Episode 9 completing the sequel trilogy, Rey and Kylo Ren's stories come to a dramatic close with huge reveals about Rey's parents, her connection to the dark side, and Kylo's fate. Yippee-ki-yay movie lovers, I'm Jan, and in this video I'll be explaining Rey and Kylo Ren's journey in the Rise of Skywalker, and revealing all the hidden clues that foretold their ultimate destiny. There will of course be spoilers, so take care if you haven't seen the movie yet. In the very final scene of Episode 9, we see Rey visit Luke's old home, the Lars homestead on Tatooine, where she buries both Luke and Leia's sabers in honour of their sacrifice for the freedom of the galaxy. She then unveils her own new lightsaber, and when an old lady asks who she is, Rey replies that she's Rey Skywalker, as the Force ghosts of Luke and Leia look upon her. It's a bold statement that will doubtless spark debate because Rey isn't a Skywalker by blood. What Rey's really doing here is twofold. Firstly, on a personal note, she's showing her allegiance and adopting the family she identifies with over her biological one. Rey isn't a Jedi because of her heritage, but because of how she chooses to act and who she chooses to be. And secondly, she's taking the legendary family name and establishing it as an identity or title for the future Jedi. And Rey looking out over Tatooine with the twin suns in the distance is of course a nostalgic callback to A New Hope, when Luke looked out over the sunset and dreamed of adventure, and signals Rey as the new hope for future generations. In fact, Rey becoming an honorary or adoptive Skywalker is something that the new trilogy set up early on in The Force Awakens. At Maz Kanata's castle, Rey hears voices from the basement that lead her to Luke's old lightsaber that he lost during his duel with Darth Vader.
That lightsaber was Luke's and his father's before him, and now it calls to you.
This is a saber that Rey uses through the whole of the trilogy, and as Maz mentioned, it also originally belonged to Anakin Skywalker. Later in The Force Awakens, when Rey and Kylo Ren battle for control of the lightsaber, it flies to Rey's hand, not Kylo's, even though he is a Skywalker via his mother Leia's bloodline. And Kylo felt entitled to that Skywalker saber because of his heritage.
That lightsaber, it belongs to me.
He eventually gets to wield it in the Rise of Skywalker when Rey passes it to him through their Force bond after he arrives on Exegol. At that point, he's given up the identity of Kylo Ren, having turned to the light and become Ben again, making him worthy of wielding the saber. Rey ultimately defeats the Emperor by combining that legendary lightsaber with Leia's saber, which symbolises the passing of the baton from both the Skywalker siblings, as well as Rey's vital connection with them, and their crucial impact on her character and journey in this saga. The way Rey crosses the sabers together in this scene is a moment that visually recalls how Luke and Darth Vader crossed lightsabers as they duelled in front of the Emperor in Return of the Jedi. And that defensive lightsaber technique, which deflects Palpatine's lightning back to him, reminds me of what Yoda once taught Luke.
A Jedi uses the Force for knowledge and defense, never for attack.
Rey embracing the Skywalker legacy as a title that future Jedi can use and honour also gives meaning to the title of Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, and is something that Snoke foresaw in The Force Awakens.
If Skywalker returns, the new Jedi will rise.
And by the way, there's also precedents in the history of our own galaxy of famous family names becoming titles that future leaders acquire. The title of Caesar that numerous Roman emperors gave themselves was taken from the most famous man of that name, Julius Caesar, even though they weren't related to him by blood. The traditional phrase, "the king is dead, long live the king," is another example of this idea of continuity with change, and the idea that the Skywalker name will now live on through future generations of Jedi.
We've passed on all we know. 1,000 generations live in you now. But this is your fight. We'll always be with you.
And that Jedi legacy is what Rey felt when the voices of Jedi past called to her, giving her the strength to finally defeat Palpatine. But what about Rey's actual bloodline? After all, in The Force Awakens, Rey's ancestry and background was set up as an important detail to pay attention to.
Where do you come from? Classified, really? Me too. Big secret.
The Last Jedi intriguingly subverted many fans' expectations when we discovered her parents were nobodies.
Do you want to know the truth about your parents? They're filthy junk traders who sold you off for drinking money.
But similar to Obi-Wan Kenobi's certain point of view explanation of his original claim that Darth Vader killed Luke's father, in Episode 9, Kylo tells Rey that her parents chose to be nobodies to protect her, as her father was Palpatine's son, making her a descendant of the Emperor, his granddaughter. Rey's link to the dark side was strongly hinted at during her training with Luke in Episode 8, when she discovered she had a powerful connection with the dark force beneath the island.
You went straight to the dark.
That place was trying to show me something.
It offered something you needed. And you didn't even try to stop yourself.
Luke was terrified of this, given his previous experience with his nephew.
I've seen this raw strength only once before, in Ben Solo. It didn't scare me enough then. It does now.
Episode 9 further develops this theme of Darkside Rey when she gives into anger and accidentally lets loose a lightning blast that blows up a transport ship, thereby revealing her connection to the Emperor. Lightning blasts are of course Palpatine's signature attack style, and Rey even acknowledges that the lightning power came from within her. We witness Rey struggle to contain her anger and her path towards the dark side in Episode 9 when she arrives on the wreck of the second Death Star and enters the old destroyed throne room of the Emperor. After she picks up the Sith Wayfinder, she has a vision and encounter with a dark version of herself who seemingly bests her. The moment has some parallels with Luke's dark side cave encounter on Dagobah, when he struck down in anger a vision of Darth Vader only to reveal his own face underneath the helmet. And when Kylo confronts her on the Death Star and destroys the Wayfinder, Rey gives in to anger again and attacks him. In this duel, Rey's anger fuels her dark side in a similar way to how Luke became enraged when he confronted Vader again in Return of the Jedi.
Good. Your hate has made you powerful.
And just as Luke chopped off Vader's hand, Rey attacks Kylo with his own red lightsaber and stabs him while he's distracted by a force call from Leia. It's a crucial moment for Rey, who's brought back from the brink of giving in entirely to the dark side when she senses Leia's passing. And it makes me think of how Luke also pulled himself back from the dark side when the Emperor tried to goad him into killing his father Darth Vader. After Rey's failure to control her fear and anger, she goes to the island to withdraw herself from the world as Luke did. Here she's reunited with Luke's Force Ghost, who gives her that crucial third lesson she seems to have missed in The Last Jedi. Luke reminds her that retreating from the world in fear isn't the answer.
Confronting fear is the destiny of a Jedi. Your destiny.
After all, as Yoda previously told Luke,
Anger, fear, aggression. The dark side of the Force are they.
And Leia told Rey at the beginning of Episode 9 to never be afraid of who she is. Leia already knew that Rey was a Palpatine, but as Luke explains, his sister understood that Rey's spirit and heart were more important, and that some things are stronger than blood. And this is perhaps one of the biggest messages to take away from these films, that no one is or should be completely defined by their past. After all, Poe is a former spice runner, Finn and Janna were both stormtroopers, and Rey was a scavenger. But more important than their previous lives or the families they were born into or even forced into is the family they later choose for themselves or adopt as their own. Just as Maz Kanata told Rey in The Force Awakens,
The belonging you seek is not behind you, it is ahead.
And Maz followed that up by asking her to take Luke's lightsaber, a sign that Rey's true family and sense of connection would be with the Skywalkers and the Jedi. By the end of Episode 9, Rey understands this and rejects Palpatine when he tells her that the throne is her birthright, and instead allies herself with Ben to stand against the Emperor and the Sith. To understand Kylo Ren's redemptive arc, we need to go back to the beginning of The Force Awakens, where we find him already conflicted in his feelings of allegiance to the dark side.
Forgive me. I feel it again. The pull to the light. Supreme Leader senses it. Show me again the power of the darkness.
In fact, there's an intriguing message underlying what Rey says to Kylo after he captures her in The Force Awakens.
You're afraid that you will never be as strong as Darth Vader.
The hidden meaning in this line is that although Vader was a villain, he eventually found the strength to turn back to the light side and stand against the Emperor. Kylo, however, believes he needs to be strong to embrace the dark side, which we see in what he says to his father Han Solo just before killing him.
I know what I have to do, but I don't know if I have the strength to do it.
But in Episode 9, Kylo eventually finds true strength when he talks to his father again after his battle with Rey on the Death Star. Han, who appears as one of his memories, reminds him that Ben isn't dead, but Kylo Ren is. And using the same words that he said to his father on Starkiller Base, Ben now throws his lightsaber into the water, finally rejecting his dark side identity of Kylo Ren. That eventual redemption for him began in The Last Jedi, where Rey felt that the connection she was beginning to establish through their Force bond meant he could still be turned back to the light side.
You failed him by thinking his choice was made. It wasn't. There's still conflict in him. Just now, when we touched hands, I saw his future. If I go to him, Ben Solo will turn. Then he's our lost hope.
And Ben does become Rey's last hope when he stands with her against the Emperor, and then brings her back by force healing her after she collapses from the exertion of killing Palpatine. It was also Kylo's connection with his mother Leia that kept him from fully turning to the dark side. In The Last Jedi, he stopped himself from firing upon Leia's ship when he sensed her presence, and that moment is revisited in The Rise of Skywalker when Leia calls to him and stops him from delivering a fatal blow to Rey during their duel on the Death Star. Together, both Leia and Han bring their son back, something that Leia told Han they would do in The Force Awakens.
We can still save him. Me. You.
So basically what Lor San Tekka told Kylo at the very beginning of the sequel trilogy turned out to be right.
You cannot deny the truth. That is your family. I know where you come from. Before you called yourself Kylo Ren.
Ultimately, his Kylo Ren alter ego has been a performance, a big act by a person trying to take on the enormous mantle of the infamous Darth Vader. Unlike Vader though, Kylo didn't require his helmet to survive.
Take off that mask. You don't need it.
It was just another way to conceal who he really was, while he tried every way he could to be something he ultimately wasn't.
You're no Vader. You're just a child. In a mask.
So although Kylo Ren had worshipped the legend of the Sith Lord Darth Vader,
Show me, grandfather, and I will finish what you started.
by the end, like Anakin, Ben rejects the Emperor and the way of the Sith and redeems himself. Now, how do you feel about Rey and Kylo's endings in The Rise of Skywalker and their arcs through the sequel trilogy? Comment with your thoughts below, and if you enjoyed this, a thumbs up is hugely appreciated. And don't forget to subscribe to get all my new videos. Tap left for my next Star Wars video, or tap right for another video you're sure to like. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Yippee-ki-yay, movie lovers!